It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.
Hey, welcome to the Really Charlie Podcast. I'm Charlie Perry, and today's guest is George Weinstein. I am so impressed with this man. All the different things he has on his shelf, his bookshelf is loaded with some amazing books that he wrote. You know, never mind what other people wrote, it's what he wrote. So I can't wait to chop it up with him. And previously we had another outstanding author, which was his wife, Kim Conray. And I am so happy that I had met her because of her, I met this gentleman, and I'm very, very happy. God is good in my eyes. God is good.
Indeed.
All right. I'm just going to let the audience know a little bit about you. You can find a lot of information about George on George Weinstein, Steen. .com. George is an author of numerous novels in diverse genres, including the sassy Southern mystery Aftermath, his kidnapping thriller, Watch What You Say, and the domestic drama about reinvention, The Caretaker, the novel of a forgotten U.S. history, The Five Destinies of Carlos Moreno. His Southern Gothic historic novel, which is going to be the first book I get. It's called Hardscrabble Road, a favorite with book clubs. This long-awaited Hardscrabble sequel is coming up, and that will be Return of Hardscrabble Road, which will be published on October 11, 2022. So I cannot wait to get those books on my bookshelf, man.
Thank you.
So the I just I listened to a lot of different podcasts that you were on, and the consensus is that everybody's impressed with what you have written, how you became a writer, your involvement with the Atlanta Book Club,
Writers Club.
Yeah, Writers Club. Sorry.
Yep.
Man, how could I mess up something that's been around over 100 years,
Easy to do.
I just got my afternoon ended really well because I ended with listening to some of the podcasts that you were on, which actually led to me subscribing and following those podcasts because I thought the hosts were very informative, and I like their interview, and I can learn a lot from those interviews. So I'm going to continue to follow those people because they already taught me a lot just in the afternoon. So I want to let's go back in a little. First, I want to say hi to my friend Michael. Michael's an author too. He's in the process of writing his first book, George, and
that's great.
It's a great story. So I did a couple of things. I sent him a link to Southern Fried Karma, so he can kind of do his and get some information about that and publishing and all that, because his book is definitely going to be an amazing story. So I can't wait.
Yeah, hang in there, Michael.
Yeah, he will.
It's all about butt in the chair. Put your butt in the chair, your fingers on the keyboard. That's what it's all about.
He's been doing that. Trust me,
Yeah.
He has. All right. So you were born in Maryland, from what I see.
Yeah, about halfway between Baltimore and DC.
Yeah.
And as soon as I could learn to read, I wanted to write. It's just how my brain is wired. and there are no other writers in my family. I don't know why, I'm structured this way, but man, as soon as I started reading stories, I wanted to write my own.
Hmm.
So,
It's definitely it's a blessing. I had with me myself writing and doing different things throughout my lifetime. I didn't realize that my dad wrote also, but
oh,
he passed away in '92. So,
I'm sorry.
but we didn't find out that we both wrote until I was 15. So, and then it was some of the things that he wrote about was so ahead of its time, and I surely wish he was a guest on this podcast because some of the things he would talk about would be amazing. So,
Are you able to preserve all of that?
no, not at all. We
Too
it's
bad.
I have very as far as I don't have much of his stuff because of just a family accident, and
Mm.
a lot of it got destroyed, and
It's a
it's
pity.
too bad. So
That's all right, but
uh,
you remember.
yeah, yes, I do. Yes, I
Keep your
do.
life that way.
He gave me this inspiration. I wrote a poem about faith, like in religious faith,
Hmm.
and fate. And I ended up writing about it. And it was something that he threw at me when I was at a young age. He asked me, what is it? And so I tried to explain it as best I could. And then he always, he knew he defined both words. He knew the definition, and he would just basically twist it every time. Where I went with fate, he would with faith. He went back and forth with it, and
Yep.
I miss those things there where he would give me those brain teasers all the
Yep.
time. So the
Sounds like a wise man.
yes. Um, so at 6 years old, you started writing, and what was your first project?
Oh, I used to write little plays for my stuffed animals to act out on top of my bed to entertain my brother and sister. So,
Wow, very
and
nice.
and I had little plays. It's just stacked up, stapled together, just stacks of them that I did. So I'd have my favorite stuffed animals. They were the protagonist. The ones I didn't like so much, they were always the villains. And they were superheroes. They were gangsters. They were cops and robbers. All that stuff. So yeah, and nobody suggested that I do this. It was just something that I instantly wanted to do as soon as I could read. So
Wow.
uh,
Yeah.
from there, I went on to writing some short stories, and then I got sidetracked by life. I didn't do anything with those short stories. They never saw the light of day, and probably a good thing. Because I was writing them, long before I had any talent.
Hmm.
Sidetracked by life until well, really my mid-30s or so, and uh, my first wife, her father was one of the greatest storytellers God's ever put on this earth, and it was a really natural thing for him to do. Um there was nothing staged about it, or you never felt like he was putting on a show. It was just he would kick back from the supper table because it was a proper Southern household. So
Hmm.
there was dinner at noon and then supper in the evening. There was no such thing as lunch in that household.
Okay.
And he would just start talking about his growing up days in South Georgia, southwest part of the state. And he had a psychopathic bootlegger for a father and a mother who had no interest in raising her children. And so he and his two older brothers and older sister pretty much had to raise each other during the Great Depression. And they were desperately poor. And his stories were so different from my privileged middle class upbringing that I was fascinated from word go. And I would, run back to the bedroom that my first wife and I were in, and write down as much as I could remember, using the words that he used as much as
Hmm.
possible. And I started accumulating these things, and had no plans for them. It was just they were fascinating, and I wanted to record them. But after about a decade of this, I came to him and I said, "Man, you've got a memoir here if you want to write that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just want to, fictionalize, change everybody's names, oh, you've got a novel. I really think you ought to write that." And he said, "Oh no, who would care? I have no interest in writing that." And I said, "Well, I would like to write it then, and I'd like your permission to write it, and I'll change everybody's names, protect the guilty and the innocent. But you've made me care, and I didn't know you from Adam a decade ago, so
Mm-hmm.
I think I can make other people care." And that eventually became the novel Hardscrabble Road, and it has outsold all my other books combined. I could write 100 more books, and it will still outsell all my other books combined. And then excited to have the sequel finally coming out this fall. So in the first book, 80% of the book is true, and 20% is stuff I've made up, characters I made up, situations I made up.
Mm-hmm.
But almost all the bad stuff is true. And then in the sequel, the good news is all these kids survived a childhood that would have killed most of us. And they went on to fairly ordinary, mundane lives, careers in the military, and then, jobs as psychiatric nurses and electrical engineers and government contractors, all kinds of things.
Awesome.
But very pedestrian kind of, adulthoods, which would make for a really boring story.
Mm-hmm.
So in the sequel, 80% is stuff I've made up, but 20% is true. Some of the catalysts for the sequel are based on true events, but then I spin them, in my own wild ways. And that's the pleasure of writing fiction.
Sure is.
I don't tell the
Sure
truth
is.
about anything. So, if I don't like the way things happened, well, I just change them.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm glad you got that inspiration from him. When you get an inspiration from people that you're fond of, or that you just have that kind of admiration or for them, and then
Yeah.
I find that it allows me to write not near perfect, but it really gets me involved in it. I'm really into the characters, and it just flows a whole lot easier.
Yeah. There's a huge difference between writing from your heart and writing from your head,
Exactly.
So when I'm thinking about things, just actively thinking about plot and he's going to say this and she's going to say that, it's never as smooth as when I'm almost automatic writing, and it's just flowing out of me. And then I look at it later and say, I almost don't remember writing this. Where did this come from? Who's this guy?
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
So true. And I just I love writing. A teacher had inspired me to write.
Mhm.
And then a teacher shot me down, and I didn't want to write. And then later on in my adult life, another teacher came across my path and encouraged me to write again. So the good, bad, and ugly was based on some teachers that I had and
Yeah.
or known, and so. But it's been something that's really got me through a lot of things, issues, just by writing. Mainly my poetry that really just allows me to just vent. Doesn't mean I'm going through anything, but it just allows me to go through, get these thoughts out of my head and put it to writing. And I always say writing, but it's actually not writing. It's typing, texting. Now
Yeah.
it's changed, and especially with me is I had the legal pad, the yellow legal pad, and I would just write and write and write. And then switching over to, typing it. I got used to it, but it didn't. I think it was 2008 where I was trying to get used to it. Even though I had a law enforcement career where I was type in reports, but it just seemed like it was different. It just
Oh
felt
yeah.
weird. So, um, and so Hardscrabble, it just caught my attention, and I just I heard about the story, about how you were getting other stories from your father-in-law and his family. Um, that must have been interesting because as to me, as they were telling you something real interesting about the story or something additional to what your father-in-law said, it it probably said you probably said, I gotta write this down, I gotta write this down, but you really couldn't until you decided to leave, and go into the next room or something like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, it would have made him very self-conscious if I was sitting there taking notes.
I just
Yep.
I can't wait to have that in my hand.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
and
Y- a real interesting footnote to that is he started, his first reaction was, who would care, right?
mhm.
And he didn't think, anybody would care about his childhood. By the end, when I was bringing him chapters to make sure I got all the details right about what was like growing up on this, farm where they sharecropped. What was it like riding a school bus in 1938 in Colquitt, Georgia? All that stuff. Working in a sawmill when he was 14, 15 years old, and breaking his back in a sawmill,
Wow.
and all this stuff. The psychopathic bootlegger father and going on bootlegging runs with him, going to where these guys in a
Mhm.
swamp in North Florida made the actual corn whiskey, and all
Amazing.
that. Uh, so getting all that, he started seeing his childhood a different way. And by the end, he was writing his memoir that he
Mm.
left my first wife and her two older brothers. He left them a binder full of stories that they had never heard. I had
Wow.
never heard. But just stuff that he recalled, happened just because he got deeper and deeper into remembering his childhood. So that was a real blessing for that family, that he left them. And in this case, contrasting it with your dad, he was able to leave them something that was
Mhm.
bound and, will be on their bookshelves, for the rest of their lives and get passed on, to their kids and on and on. And they'll live on, which makes me feel good because just won't live on through a work of fiction, where I
Mhm.
had to change stuff. They actually have, the stories that,
That's amazing.
came from his fingers. So yeah, really excited to have the sequel coming out finally. People have been asking for it for about 10 years, so it's
Mhm.
about time I got that done. And why I was interested in history is I think my dad. So my dad was an amateur historian. He used to, growing up in Maryland, we were very close to a bunch of Civil War battlefields.
Yes.
Antietam and Gettysburg and on and on. And that was what he would do for fun. I was the only one of his kids who really cared about
Mhm.
any of that stuff. So he would load me in the car, and on a Saturday, we'd drive to Gettysburg or we would drive to Antietam. I walked the Antietam battlefield, I don't know how many times.
Wow.
And he could tell me all the troop movements, exactly what general was doing what and how many men died here and what heroic thing happened there. He had all that stuff in his head from reading Bruce Caton and all these
Mhm.
great Civil War historians. And so he just instilled in me very early on a love of history, and a love of reading, because that's how most of us get our history. Um, so it was no surprise, that I gravitated toward my first wife's dad, and his stories, and probably no no surprise that the first book I really wrote was The Five Destinies of Carlos Moreno, which is what I call forgotten U.S. history. I was sitting on the floor of a library in Roswell, Georgia, surrounded by stacks of books, reading about the history of Texas. I've always been fascinated by Texas. It's like its own country.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it's more than the Lone Star State. It's its own country.
I agree.
And I've always been fascinated by it. And I came across this footnote in a chapter about Texas during the Great Depression, and the footnote said very starkly that between 1928 and 1941, the government deported over 2 million people of Mexican heritage, and half of them, over 1 million people, were American citizens.
Wow.
Now, I had not heard that in a single history class I took, and I took a bunch of them. Never saw it on TV, never saw a movie about that. And so I went right back to the bibliography, and copied down all of the sources that were cited, and got those books and looked at their sources. And this has not been written about very much, but it really happened. You can go on YouTube and see interviews with people. This great repatriation, the U.S. government called it.
Wow.
That it happened to. So if you were brown and you looked poor in Chicago, in Texas, up through the Southwest, and into California, federal agents and cops could stop you on the street and say, "Prove you're a citizen," and you'd have to have a birth certificate in your pocket to do it. And you wouldn't, because why would you?
Yes.
And they would say, "Well, come with us," and they'd put you on a truck, drive you to the border, have this little kangaroo court where they found you guilty of being in the country illegally, even if your people had been here for 6 generations, and put you on what they called a repatriation train. And this was all with the cooperation of the government of Mexico,
Wow.
because they were alarmed about so many of their able-bodied people leaving and going to the U.S. to work. They were kind of grateful to get them back, put them to work in their own country, even though these people were Americans, not Mexicans.
Wow.
And so this repatriation train would go to the southern end of Mexico, Oaxaca, and places like that, kick you out, and you'd be 3,000 miles from the border. The
Amazing.
real irony, I mean, is if that wasn't bad enough, the real kick in the teeth was that when World War II started, the post office used to be so good that they got draft notices to those people living at the south end of Mexico now to say, "You've been drafted, come back and fight for the country that kicked you out a decade ago."
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
But that was finally their proof that they were American citizens, because they were drafted to go fight World War II.
That's
And they
amazing.
did, and those who survived came back and then spent the next decade trying to get their families out of Mexico. So all of this is forgotten U.S. history. Hardly anybody knows this. I was at a book signing a month ago, talking to a woman who of Mexican origins, and she knew about it. And she is the first person in nearly a decade I've spoken to at a book signing who actually knew that story. And she snapped up the book because
Yep.
she wanted to read my spin on it. But it's I think it's so important to tell these stories, and
Yes, it is.
and is it proper for a white middle class guy who grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, to tell this story? Probably not. I'm not the best person to tell that story, but as far as I can tell, other than a few scholars, I'm the only one who has. So, I hope people of with whose parents this happened to or grandparents this happened to, will tell this story too, and I'm sure they'll do a much better job than I did. But I felt a real calling to get that one out, just because love history, and I hate that it's forgotten. Everybody knows about the Japanese Nisei, prisoner of war camps in World War II. Hardly anybody knows about this thing, and it affected a ton of people.
It's the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, makes you
uh,
mad.
yeah, it sure does. Only because it's you know, most of the people standing on the ground of this country really love this country.
Yeah,
So when you're standing here and then you're getting pushed away or kidnapped, and
yeah,
it just it's just amazing. So the
yeah.
so you would see, one of my things on my bucket list was to become a history teacher,
Hmm.
and you would be an ideal history teacher for me, and it'd be just because of your interest in that story. Those are the stories that I love.
Yeah,
And I used to, when I was in college, we had Mr. Seeger, and he would always go. He would, get everything out that we needed to know, and then he would go on his tear and tell us a story that was outside the curriculum,
yeah,
and that was the best part of the class for me, And I was just amazed. Um, and I really didn't get too much wrong in his class, Or I definitely did well in his class only because he had my ear, and
yeah.
from as soon as I got in, as soon as he said hello, that was it. I paid attention to him, and he was so fascinating to me, and just because he got sidetracked a little bit, and he told us a story, and it was usually the best thing of the day of the class.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll guarantee it's the stories you remember, not the dry history facts.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he
Because
was.
we are wired for story. We
Hmm.
really are.
Hmm.
It's the best way to learn. It's the best way to explain things.
Yeah.
Um, it's all about story. You know.
So, with all these books that you have, and I just, I want to I want to ask you a question, right?
Yeah. Go ahead. It's a weird
Re-
mix of books. So
yeah, and 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 that's what I'm getting at. I like I seen Aftermath. I was just glued in. The first one was Watch What You Say, right?
mhm.
That's and only
That's my
because
latest one. Yeah.
that cover,
Yeah.
it drew me into that book. So I was already that's the first one I'm
Yep.
getting, and I'm like, and then all of a sudden I started hearing, the other stories about your father-in-law, and I said, oh man, that's the one I want. So, so now it's so I already had it clear cut. I had it in order 1, 2, and 3. Well, the 3 is is a history, with Carlos Moreno. Now that's now I'm flip flopping now. So which one's gonna be 2? So I know what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to Amazon where I have some credit there, and I'm gonna get as much as I can with the balance that I have
Oh,
there, and
thank you.
just only because I can't make a decision.
Well, then I've done my job if I've
Yeah,
made them all sound compelling.
you should.
And so I love history, but I also read really widely, and that's why I write widely. I'm not sure it's the best strategy for an author. In fact, I will tell you that it is absolutely not the best strategy for an
Hmm.
author to jump genres the way I
Hmm.
do.
Yeah.
Much smarter if I had just focused on historical fiction. It's Hardscrabble and Carlos Moreno. Um, they're they're both historical. And by the way, I got a thunderstorm rolling through, so if you lose me, that it wasn't out of rudeness.
Okay.
Uh, uh, but I also love mysteries and thrillers, and
Hmm.
that's what I listen to for fun. I have hardly picked up a book in years because I'm so busy, but I've always got an audiobook going. I've always got a book on my phone,
Very nice. Same with
and
me.
yep, and I'm always listening. So I read with my ears now instead of my eyes. In the car, in the bathroom, getting ready in the morning, at night, brush my
Wow.
teeth, what have you. And mysteries and thrillers, have always captivated me. And so when I was thinking about after Hardscrabble, I wanted to take a break from the 1930s and 40s and put things in the modern age where people actually have bathrooms to go into and,
Mm-hmm.
regular clothes and stuff like that. Not like these poor boys grew up with, overalls and a work shirt and not even shoes or underwear. Um, and going to set something in a contemporary setting. Well, what do I want to write? Well, what do I listen to all the time? And it's
Mm-hmm.
mysteries and thrillers. And so I started with Aftermath, which is an amateur sleuth murder mystery. And as much as I like to read about like Michael Connelly and Harry Bosch, people who were in the system, with a badge,
Very nice.
uh, doing doing their jobs. I always like the amateur sleuth ones where people had to get by on their wits and they didn't have a badge to flash. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any authority behind them. They had no credibility. They're just doing it all, by their wits. And that was always compelling. So, uh, the and PI stories. You still still do love the Walter Mosley, Easy Rawlings stories, and all of that. Uh, so I decided to make Aftermath an amateur sleuth murder mystery. A woman goes back to a little Georgia town where she was born. She hasn't lived there for nearly 40 years. Her father, who is estranged from her, she hasn't seen him in almost all that time. He's murdered, and the police say it's an open and shut case.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only survivor of his family. She inherits his fortune and decides to reinvent herself by going down there. And then it just kind of, because she can't leave stuff alone, starts poking around into his murder and finds out there's a whole lot more there than, the police could tie up. And it ends up being her versus this little town trying to hold on to all its secrets and scandals and
Wow.
lies. And she gets herself in big trouble and has got to get herself out of it.
That's
So that was Aftermath, a real funny, snarky heroine. I always liked that the Stephanie Plum character that Janet Ivanovich writes
mm-hmm.
about, who's got a great sense of humor and all. Real
Yes.
snarky. So I wanted that kind of heroine. So Janet Wright is my Stephanie Plumish character. And then from that one, I wanted to write a kidnap thriller, but instead of the usual damsel in distress, which has been done to death, I wanted the dude in distress and the damsel
Mm-hmm.
trying to come to his rescue, which you almost never see.
No.
So, I started thinking about, well, how do I achieve that? Why is this woman's husband kidnapped? And I had been doing a lot of podcasts, not like this, but where I would actually go visit people in a studio, and they would have the microphone equipment set up and all that. And so I started, envisioning sort of a talk show host, and somebody desperately wants to get on her talk show, and
Mm-hmm.
he's got a connection with her that she doesn't realize. And the only way he's going to get on her talk show in his warped mind is to kidnap her husband and threaten to kill him if she doesn't put him on.
Wow.
So, boom, instant guest. And
I love it.
so she's got to keep up this pretense of an interview with the man who kidnapped her husband. Otherwise, he's going to shoot hubby. And it becomes almost a reverse Scheherazade story. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of, in the story of Scheherazade and 1001 Arabian Nights, she's telling these stories to save her own life. And in Watch What You Say, she's keeping this guy talking to keep her husband alive.
Wow.
And and so it becomes, it's not just one day and he's going to let him go. She has to do this day after day, and with him putting her through hell. And she's got this ability called chromesthesia, which is a
Mm-hmm.
real thing. Duke Ellington had it. Lady Gaga has it. Billy Joel has it. Pharrell Williams, Mary J. Blige. All of these people have it. And what it is you see colors and shapes for sounds that you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these people that I named are famous musicians because they've been inspired by their chromesthesia
Oh, wow.
to create the shapes and colors that they want to see in their mind, and that produces, songs that we'll know for the rest of our lives, and hopefully, our children and grandchildren's lives.
Got it.
I know they'll be playing "Take the A Train," forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to give this woman chromesthesia because I'm fascinated by it. Anything neurological, I'm really interested in.
That's very nice.
And but I need to give her a little twist. It's not enough for her to see the shapes and colors. She needs to be able to interpret them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking to her, whether face to face or like this, over an internet connection, she can tell whether you're lying to her or not by the shapes and colors she sees as you're talking to her. So she can literally watch what you say. And
Wow.
and so that's where the title comes from. And that's her hope, is that because she's this human lie detector, that she can, pull enough out of the kidnapper, maybe unbeknownst to him, that, she'll be able to get enough to figure out where her husband's at and how to rescue him. And of course, it won't be enough. She's going to have to rely on a whole lot more, personal resources than that. But anyway, that's the gist of Watch What You Say. And
That's
that was a lot of fun to write. In fact, both of these have heroines at their center, and I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed writing about both these women so much that I'm now working on a sequel where I bring them together. I figured if Marvel can keep combining their universes, I can do it too. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
so
It's a smart move, man.
yeah. So if you liked Aftermath, well, you got a sequel with Janet Wright. If you liked Watch What You Say, you got a sequel with Bo Riccardi. It's now a Thelma and Louise kind of situation, though, and they're both in it together.
Very nice.
So I'm just kind of outlining that right now, and I'll get started writing. I'm a very slow writer. It takes me years to finally finish a book, but the thoughts are always going.
Well, I'm gonna. I'll give you a title that you
Do
can
it.
start on next year. Let's see. We got the pastor, the priest, and the rabbi, and they're triplets, and they're female. How would you rate that?
Ready, set, go. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So it just just think of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just probably neither one of them. Well, maybe a pastor, maybe a female, but when you kind of link it,
Oh, you
they're
got female
triplets.
rabbis now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you and they're all female, and they're triplets, so that means they're all related.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
And a big nature versus nurture discussion.
mhm.
They all three chose paths of faith, but
Yes,
but very different things.
that's true. We have
Yeah.
I have two pastors in my life and in my family,
Hmm.
and their brothers. One had passed away, but
Yeah.
they basically were two different teachers and messengers. They
Yeah.
did it differently,
Yep.
but I love listening to both of them, and it's one of them had wrote a book. And I like to get him on my podcast, but he's so busy. But I need to get him on there because his book is interesting, and it teaches you scriptures and stuff. And it definitely, but it's a great book, and it's focused on teaching men, men, and but I like to get him on. So, If you hear me, Pastor Robert Mendes, I need to get you on the Really Charlie podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad you focus on so many writers. I love writers. My life is just immersed with writers. I've surrounded myself with writers. About 20 years ago, I joined the Atlanta Writers Club, and I discovered my calling is not writing; it's helping other writers.
Wow, I agree.
When I was growing up, my best friend, he knew he wanted to be a doctor. And I always envied him because I just kind of staggered through school and I didn't know what I wanted to be. I enjoyed writing, but knew that was a really hard row to hoe. And,
Yes.
very few writers make their living writing. Most of them are teachers or do other things. Um, so, I just kind of, just drifted through school going, toward one thing and then another. And he always laser focused. I'm going to be a medical doctor. And he is to this day. I'm going to see him
Mm,
next week for the first time in years. And I'm really excited because, growing up, I remember just being so envious of him because
hmm
he just knew. And when I joined the Atlanta Writers Club, and I realized how much fun it was helping other writers, saying, "Oh, here's a resources, that's going to be great for you. Uh, I met this person who's a book cover designer. You're looking for a book cover designer, match them up." So I almost become this old-fashioned Yenta matchmaker,
I love it. I love
uh,
it.
marrying people up. But I really discovered that is my calling, and I've had leadership roles in the Atlanta Writers Club since real 2002. I guess I took on my first board role, and I became president in 2004, and then president again a few years ago, and I'm executive director for life. I think there's nobody who's knocking at that door wanting to get in. So I think God willing, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, just helping other writers.
I like
And
to
I
give
run
you.
a. Go ahead.
I like to give you guys a 5-star for the two conferences that you have, and
Yeah, yeah. So that's really my main focus. Is every year I run 2 writers conferences. The Atlanta Writers Conference, unimaginative title. Once in the spring and again in the fall. So our next one is November 4th and 5th of this year, and we do it in a hotel down by the airport. And I bring in literary agents and acquisitions editors who work for publishers, and we've gotten a bunch of people representation deals with agents and publishing deals with publishers. One of our alumna, Becky Albertalli, her book Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda was turned into a movie, Love, Simon, that came out 2018, and
Mhm.
was a big enough hit that Hulu now has Love, Victor on it,
I heard
and
that.
that's a spinoff from
Wow,
Love, Simon. So she's got a TV show and a movie out of her book, and she got her agent through the Atlanta Writers Conference. So we are really proud. I drop her name whenever I can
hmm
because she's really made us proud. And
that's sounds
and
like a getaway for me on November 4th. I think.
yeah, 4th and 5th. Yeah, so
Okay.
so the way we structure the conference is on the 4th. It's all about education, where you can do query letter critiques, because a query letter, for people who don't know, and most people don't. Why would you? Query letter is a business letter where you're trying to describe to an agent or editor what's so great about your book, why they should be interested in getting the
hmm
manuscript and digging into it. So it's a sales pitch,
Yes.
and it is harder to write than the doggone book is,
I believe it.
because you hold it, you got to hold it to a page, and you've got to cram in everything you think is great and kind of synthesize it down to what, 200 words
hmm
less, something like that. and have enough about the book to intrigue people and enough about yourself to make them think, well, I can envision this person as my client. They seem really cool. And it's a really hard document to write. So we do query letter critiques with the agents and editors on Friday, people who you are not going to meet with, people who can objectively look at your work and say, hey, Charlie, here's how to make it better, so
Mm-hmm.
that when you have your meetings on Saturday, you're going to put your best stuff forward.
Wow.
And so Friday's all about that education and that getting that feedback from independent sources. And then and we do workshops and other educational things. And so this time I've got Alex Finley, who's a breakout thriller writer, and he's going to do first page critiques. So he'll take people's first pages of their manuscripts and do critiques live right there during the workshop and say, you're doing this great, do more of this. Here's some things that bump me out. Here's some ideas for ways to correct it.
Wow.
So that's Friday, and we have a nice little mixer with all the agents and editors. You get a chance to meet them all with a drink in your hand, and just kind of socialize and schmooze with them. And then on Saturday is the real meat and potatoes of the conference. They do manuscript sample critiques, so you can submit pages of your manuscript in advance. And they'll have given you feedback in advance so that you can come prepared. You know what they're going to talk about. You have your questions, based on their feedback. They've told you whether they're going to be interested in getting more pages from you. And pitches, where you have that nasty query letter, and you're bringing that with you to give them a little heads up about what your project's about, and and then having a conversation about it and trying to get their interest. And trying to get them to say, oh, that sounds great, send me your manuscript. And so it's, Saturday's the real stressful day. So we have fun on Friday, and then we sweat a lot on Saturday. And let's see, this is my 27th Atlanta Writers Conference. So I've been
Very
doing
nice.
it well over a decade, and just find it so satisfying. I want to do this for the rest of my life. Just trying to
Amen.
match up
I love it.
agents and editors with writers and give people an opportunity, because that's what they need. This business is so hard. Everybody hides behind these firewalls. The only way to get their attention is to bring them to a conference. That's your
I agree.
only opportunity. You cannot knock on some literary agent's door and say, hey, can I take you to lunch? No.
Yes.
They don't want to go to lunch with you. I don't care if you're buying, they don't want to go to lunch with you. They've got way too many people who are knocking on their doors wanting to do that. So they don't open that door. The only time they open is at a writer's conference.
I agree.
So we open that door for you, basically. And that's what I found I really love. As much as I like writing, it's the Writers Club and and these conferences that really jazz me and just
That's nice.
get me up each day.
How's it work for a guy like me that all my books are self-published?
Well, do you have a manuscript that isn't self-published that you're working on?
Let's see. Yeah, a few of them, but they're probably, if I had to give it a where it's at, it's probably at the very first third of each book, so,
Right.
yeah.
So one thing you can do is you can bring, or you can submit query letter. Are these nonfiction?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So you can submit a query letter and a 20-page book proposal, because in nonfiction, they want to see a book proposal which includes a sample chapter, but they want to know about you and your marketing and what's your platform and why are you the guy to write this book. So that's all in the book proposal. And you can submit it to them, and you can be very frank in your query letter and say, look, I'm still working on this, but I want you to tell me where I've gone off the rails, because I can still get back on the rails because I'm not
Yeah,
done with the thing yet.
exactly.
And I can still build my platform if you don't think it's a sufficient platform yet. And I want your ideas about that. And you can put them to work and say, I'm meeting with you because I want your ideas. I'm not trying to sell you anything because I'm not ready yet with this project.
Hmm.
But I want your feedback. So that's one thing you can do. Some of the agents and editors say that they are open to self-published work. So in their cases, you could take, the one that has done the best, because they're going to be interested in sales history,
Hmm.
and present the evidence for that, and say, this one has sold X thousands of copies or whatever, and and I think it's worthy of finding a bigger audience, and that's why I'm interested in agent representation or a publisher. Uh,
Awesome.
so the only reason you go to an agent, by the way, for those of y'all out there who don't know, is you're interested in a contract with one of the big five publishers. And those are the publishers that even non-writers can name:
Hmm.
Random House, Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, Macmillan, all those guys, Hachette. Um, you want an agent if you're shooting for the stars,
Okay.
if you're swinging for the fences. You don't need an agent to go after mid-level and small publishers. They'll work directly with authors. And so some of the publishers I bring are some of the big ones.
Hmm.
So I have somebody from Simon and Schuster and somebody from HarperCollins and the like. But I also have somebody from Source Books and somebody from Artemis Press and Devil's Party Press and other publishers, Chicago Review Press, other publishers who will work directly with the author. That they don't need to have an agent as a go-between. They'll work directly with the author. And so those are opportunities where you can skip the agent and go right to publishing.
Very
Um,
nice.
and so that's an exciting opportunity that we offer. That if you want to swing for the fences, and there are lots of people who have stars in their eyes, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
You ought to if you can. You
Yeah.
can be Becky Albertalli. But if you want to get your book out sooner, and you don't need to, the book to have HarperCollins on the spine or Simon and Schuster or whatever, um, and you're fine with a smaller publisher, a smaller footprint, then these people are seriously looking for more authors. So that's it's an exciting opportunity for our participants to actually meet with publishers who would publish them, rather than say, oh, when you get an agent, call me.
That's great.
Because we got those too, but
Yeah.
we also got the ones who are willing to work with the average Janes and Joes
Yeah.
and
It's
Charlies.
and in this case, Michael's also. This
Yes,
is
absolutely.
this is Charlie. Let's connect on the writers conference, and I will reserve the corporate transportation. I love it. See
Yeah,
that?
so if people are interested in the Writers Conference, you can Google Atlanta Writers Conference, and we'll come up, first on Google. But you can also just go to atlantawritersconference.com, and all the information is there. And my contact information is all over that thing, so you can get in
Okay.
touch with me if you have any questions about the conference or the Atlanta Writers Club. We have members in Alaska, we have members in Germany, in Africa, in the Caribbean.
Wow.
We got members all over the world because people are getting stuff out of it. Even though we got in-person meetings, we also do online workshops, so anybody around the world can participate in those, in their pajamas. We got a yearly writing contest where members can live anywhere. They can live on the International Space Station and submit.
I love it. I love it.
So, and we have cash prizes for those. We have online critique groups. So again, doesn't matter where you live, you can participate in a critique group of ours. All that information is at AtlantaWritersClub.org. If you don't mind another plug.
No, that's great. That's what you're here for. And just look, being on your website as I found a lot of resources for myself, and even on your Facebook page, and I was just grabbing what I could, to say, hey, I'm interested in this, especially with the Atlanta's Writers Club. That is, I draw some interest with the, Southern Fried Karma, and I just those things that I'm very, very interested in.
Yeah, it's a really neat group. As you alluded to at the beginning of the show, they have been around since 1914. The Atlanta Writers Club has.
Awesome.
And you can imagine what the group was like when they started out. Just a bunch of white folks, meeting in a very exclusive environment. But now we've got over 1,100 members. And it looks like the city of Atlanta. It's an incredibly diverse group, and LGBTQ, neural diversity, so people with autism. So we got all kinds of neural diversity. There's just every kind of person you'd ever hope to meet. Is engaged through this Writers Club. And it's really, really heartening to see so many people from so many diverse backgrounds come together and, just share this love of writing and, and love of story.
It's amazing. I have some family down there, and they left Cape Cod and never came back. So, and it's a lot of what you're talking about, the diversity. There's so much to do. There's so much, as far as any career that you may be qualified for, it's there, it's in place. So, but I'm happy for you folks down there doing the right thing.
Hey, thank you. It's an amazing group.
Yeah.
Come see us.
I will. I sure will. George, I have a question that I ask all my guests, and
hit me.
Who would you like to see on the Really Charlie podcast?
Well, I got a host of writers to share with you, so I'll send you all their contact information. Sure. Anybody in the arts that you can bring, and arts is as general a word as as you want to apply. I think anything can be done creatively and artistically, from welding and bricklaying to to law enforcement.
Yes.
to everything. I just love to hear from people who are doing whatever they're passionate about, whatever they do, in a creative way, in an authentic way, in a way that brings them joy, and that and they're able to convey that joy. So whether you're talking to God or wrangling gophers, if you do it with love, I want to see him on your show.
Awesome. I'm going to do that. And that's what drives me and keeps this podcast going, is because of the guests that I have on here. And I gained some friendships, and I gained some knowledge in every single podcast that I had. Except my brother's podcast. When he was on it, he swore so much. I thought I was only joking. I love my brother. He's funny. He's I call him the Michael Epps of the family. He's a comedian just like him, and but he was also my lifetime best friend. You know, I never had to look for friends in the neighborhood, and we moved from Massachusetts to California. I went down to Florida, so he wasn't with me in Florida, but you know, no matter where we went, I never had to look for friends because I always had one in the same house. So
That's beautiful.
yeah, we played sports together. We got in trouble together. You know, so it's definitely you know, I'm glad my parents gave me a brother to grow up with. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. You're very lucky.
yeah. So we're gonna I'm gonna continue to support you. I'm gonna continue
Thank
to
you.
share everything that you
Likewise.
possibly are involved in. I'll put it on the podcast on the pages. But first and foremost, I'm gonna be a fan of yours, and I'm definitely gonna add to my bookshelf like I do with most of my guests. And your routine during the day is to listen to Audible books, and I do the same. I mean, if you don't see earbuds in my ears, you know, there's something wrong. I must have lost them or something. So,
Yeah.
and
Well, the guy who narrates Hardscrabble Road also does Five Destinies. Guy, his stage name is Ben Collins, and he's a marvelous actor and just perfect in both of those roles.
awesome. Elizabeth Bailey says, "Great podcast, guys. I definitely gained some knowledge tonight and look forward to reading your books, George."
Oh,
Good.
thank you. I
That's
really
awesome.
appreciate that. Thanks very much.
That's nice.
Yeah, we're
So,
Facebook friends. So, thank you.
awesome. Yeah, hopefully you get 100 or so more friends because of this podcast. You
I'd love
deserve it. You really deserve it.
Oh, thank you.
All right, my friend, you keep in touch.
Yes,
And
I promise to.
anything I could do for you, I'm a message away.
And likewise.
And I'll definitely let me see, 9 out of 10. I think I'm going to be at that conference November 4th.
Well, and if that doesn't work, we've got another one next May, and then another one next November, and as long as my old heart is ticking.
Yeah, sooner the better for me because my creativity is really going now, and so this is the best time for me to listen and learn from some people that can help me out.
Yep. Well, we'll hook you up.
All right.
I love you. Thank you so much for this.
Love you too, man. Give the family a high five, and including the four-legged friend family that you have there.
Yep.
You know, give them a high five for me, and I really appreciate you.
All right. I'll be listening to your show.
All right. Thank you, George.
All right. Take care.
Take care. All right. Let's see. All right. Hey, I know every podcast I'm gaining a friend. This is a fascinating author, you know, and I'm going to leave that on the bottom screen there. Continue, go to his website, listen to some podcasts on Spotify. Just punch his name in the search, and just listen to his stories. They're amazing. And these books are definitely something that's worth listening to, whether it's through Spotify, Audible books, and definitely get them. And you know, and Atlanta's Writers Club, man, he's a great sponsor. A great example, a great representative of that club, and it's been going on over 100 years, as he said. So, please support George and his books, and you will. I guarantee you, if you don't like his books, send me the bill and I'll buy the book and I'll give it to someone else, you know, because that's definitely that's a top quality author, and I can't wait to meet him person to person. And so you take care. Got podcasts coming up every week. Wednesday, I'm going to continue to add guests here. And so continue to support the podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Really Charlie, and feel free. You can get in touch with me. I'll bring any one of the guests that you want on here, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, controversial. I don't care. This is a podcast where people really get to say what they have to. All right. God bless y'all. Take care. And I'll be seeing you.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.